Moishe's Miracle, A Hanukkah Story by Laura Melmed, illustrated by David Slonim. Starlight, star bright, magic on a winter's night, white snow, candle glow, far away and long ago. In the poor village of Wishniak lived a milkman named Moishe and his wife Bela. Since he owned only 2 cows, Moishe earned a meager living. Still, he was known as a generous man, always ready to help his neighbors. Bela scrubbed and cooked and tried to scrape together a few kopecks for a nice Shabbat meal. But oi, how she could scold. Everyone said she had the sharpest tongue in Wishniak and little patience for Moishe's generous ways. It was early winter and already the wind prowled the icy lanes of the village like a starving jackal. Many were feeling the pangs of hunger, Malka the widow and her ailing son Shmuel, Heshi Fenster out of work and his wife expecting their 13th child, frail Bubby Rivka, housebound with her calico cat. Moishe left an extra quart of milk here, a pint of thick cream there. On the night before the holiday of Hanukkah was to begin, Bela untied her knipple, the knot in her handkerchief in which she kept their money, and shook the handkerchief in Moishe's face. "Empty! All because of your foolish generosity. How will I buy the eggs and flour to make our Hanukkah latkes, much less the oil to fry them in?" Moishe imagined coins falling from the handkerchief in Bela's pan, where they turned into golden potato pancakes. He could almost smell those latkes frying. Oh well, he thought with a sigh, we ought to be thankful for what we have. "Bela, don't fret," he soothed. "There are enough onions and potatoes for a nice pot of soup." But Bela would not listen. "How did I end up with the Shmuel when I could have married the baker's son?" And on she scolded, hands on her hips and eyes rolled heavenward, until Moishe fled to the cowshed for some peace. He flopped down on straw. How sleepy he felt. "Moishe! Moishe!" The milkman sat up suddenly. Rubbing his eyes, he looked around to see who was calling him. Imagine his astonishment when he found out that it was one of his cows. "You have cared well for us, Moishe. You keep our shed clean, milk us on time, and feed us plenty." "Most assuredly," chimed in the other cow. "So, although we seldom reveal to humans our power to speak, we want to help you, dear Moishe." "While you were sleeping here tonight," the first cow went on, "a stranger came to the shed. For hours he entertained us with tales of magic and adventure. You snored loudly all the while, but before leaving, he hid a gift for you, there, under the straw." She pointed with her velvety black nose. "For me?" Moishe reached down and felt something cold and hard. He pulled out a battering frying pan encrusted with grease. "An old pan?" He tried not to show his disappointment. "But such a pan!" exclaimed the second cow. "According to the stranger, you have only to set it upon the fire totally empty, and it will produce as many delicious Hanukkah latkes as you wish. Latkes by the dozen, latkes by the hundreds will appear until you remove the pan from the stove. Just remember the stranger's warning. To Moishe this gift was given, and only Moishe must use it." Moishe was overjoyed. He showered thanks on the cows and milked them, for it was early in the morning. Then he returned to the house and hid the frying pan on top of the wardrobe, intending to surprise his wife with it later on. That evening, Moishe and Bela lit the first Hanukkah candle with the shamus, the candle used to light the others. They would add a candle to the menorah on each of the 8 nights of Hanukkah, with the menorah glowing in the window. Moishe took down the magic frying pan and told Bela all that had happened in the cowshed, being careful to repeat the stranger's warning. Of course, Bela believed not a word of Moishe's story. "I've never heard anything so meshugah in all my life," she scoffed. "A pan is a pan." Nevertheless, Moishe placed the pan over the fire. A lively sizzle filled the air. Soon the rich aroma of potatoes and onions frying made Moishe's nose twitch and Bela's mouth water. And then there were latkes, plump as little pillows with edges like golden lace. The latkes were so light they floated right into the air as they finished cooking. Bela and Moishe leaped about the kitchen catching them. When each had a plateful, Moishe removed the pan from the fire. Then he and Bela ate their fill and went to bed. How Moishe tossed and turned that night, twisting the coverlets into knots. Perhaps he had eaten too many latkes. In his dreams he saw Shmuel and Bubby Rivka, the calico cat and the Fenster brood. They marched around his bed, holding empty plates and staring at him with hungry eyes. The next morning, Moishe left a note on every doorstep. "Happy Hanukkah! Please come for latkes tonight at Moishe the milkman's." It seemed that all of Wishniak squeezed into Moishe and Bela's little house that night. Latkes galore sailed from the magic pan. There was singing and dancing to Heshi's accordion, and the children spun dreidels, little Hanukkah tops. Only Bela stood apart, shaking her head. Moishe was giving things away, as usual, and making a mess of her house. If she could just get rid of him for a while, she would take matters into her own hands. The next day, Bela hid the Hanukkah candles under the bed. "Moishe, there are 6 more days of Hanukkah left, and all our candles are gone," she wailed. Then she sent him off to borrow some from her sister in the next village. She knew it would take him hours to walk there and back. As soon as the door banged shut, Bela made a sign and hung it in the window. Bela's Cafe, luscious latkes, 1 kopek each. She took down the magic frying pan. Of course, she remembered Moishe's words about the stranger's warning. "To Moishe this gift was given, and only Moishe must use it." But why shouldn't the magic work for her too? After all, she was his wife. Bela placed the pan over the fire. There was the sizzling sound. It grew louder and louder as she waited for the perfume of frying latkes to reach her nose. But instead, a burning odor filled the kitchen. Bela pushed the pan away from the flame, but the smell grew stronger, catching in her throat. A plume of smoke uncoiled like a gray serpent. Dipping up some water, Bela flung it into the pan. The water splattered everywhere, and before she could blink, each droplet changed into a hairy little demon with pointy ears and forked tail. The creatures danced around and around Bela, giggling and pelting her with burnt latkes. Then, climbing onto the chairs and the table, they shook empty handkerchiefs in her face. Bela spun this way and that until she was dizzy, but she could not escape them. Just as she swooned to the floor, the door opened. In blew Moishe on a cold draft. He was followed by Wishniak's own rabbi and his wife, the Rebbitzin, whom Moishe had chanced to meet on his way out of town. It was the Rebbitzin who sold candles to the villagers, and she had kindly given Moishe enough candles to last for the rest of the holiday. Moishe in turn had invited the couple home for latkes. The demons took one look at the rabbi, shrieked in terror, jumped back into the pan, and vanished instantly into a belch of smoke. Bela was brought back to her senses by a whiff of the Rebbitzin smelling salts. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. The demons had scared her speechless. Forever grateful to Moishe for saving her, Bela took time from her housework to help with the milking. She fed the cows and cleaned the shed. With his newfound love of cooking and entertaining, Moishe prepared meals and cared for the house. By the end of Hanukkah, Bela found that she could speak again, in a voice so kind that even the cows conversed with her. From then on, Moishe and Bela were seen delivering the milk together. As for the magic frying pan, even back in Moishe's hands, it refused to make another pancake. So instead of sitting on top of the wardrobe, it was sealed on a display case in the rabbi's courtyard. But the fame of the latkes and the tale of the demons spread, and soon folks were traveling from far and wide to see it. Everyone hoped to see the demons under glass, making a surprise appearance, and sometimes they did. The visitors to Wishniak needed food and lodging, heels for their boots and hay for their horses. Soon the village grew into a bustling market town where no one went hungry. And for years to come, even on the coldest Hanukkah night, candles burned brightly in the windows, and the smell of frying latkes rose over the houses in a golden haze that seemed to reach the stars. Snow on the rooftops, milk in the pail. That is the end of this Hanukkah tale. Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a Jewish winter festival celebrating the victory of the Maccabees over the Syrians in 167 BC. The Syrian ruler, Antiochus IV, worshipped Greek gods and wanted to force the Jews to do the same. He had a huge statue of Zeus placed in the great temple of Jerusalem, the most holy place in Jewish worship. Judah Maccabee led a small band of fighters against the strong army of Antiochus for 3 years. Although the Jewish rebels had little training and their equipment was poor, they triumphed. But the Syrians had sacked and burnt the temple. The Jews immediately began to rebuild it. According to legend, when Judah Maccabee lit the lamps of the great candelabrum, called the menorah, there was oil enough to burn for only 1 day, yet miraculously the oil burned for 8 days and nights. Jewish people traditionally light candles in their homes for 8 nights during the festival of Hanukkah, starting with one the first evening. The light is added each night to one of 8 holders on a family's menorah. The shamus, a 9th candle, often standing apart or taller than the rest, is used to light the others.